How do I create new user roles for my Drupal site? Okay, so in the last few screencasts, we've been talking about users and user roles and permissions, and there's a good reason for that. You will very likely at some point, if you're administrating any site that is, larger than just a simple site, you will probably want to get more people involved in adding content and helping out with your site. And in that case, you're going to want to create new user roles because it's generally a bad idea to have dozens of administrators. You really want to, how do I put this nicely? You want to give as few permissions to people as possible. Um, in other words, give them the fewest opportunities possible to screw up your website. So in this case, I'm going to say, I'm going to pretend that let's say we were building some sort of a website where we're going to have articles on it, maybe news articles or concert reviews or something of that nature. And let's say we would like to have a role where somebody could come in and edit. Check for spelling, just go in and take a look at at articles that have been published and edit them for clarity, for spelling, etc. Okay, so in other words, I'd like to create an editor role. Okay, this editor role would have probably, I'd imagine that they'd have more permissions than just a plain old contributor role. A contributor could maybe just, contribute content, but they wouldn't be able to go in and change other people's contents. Where we're going to create a role where an editor can log in, and there's somebody that we trust enough to go in and edit content, but we're not going to go and give them the keys to the whole Drupal site. Like they're not going to be able to start changing colors and structure and installing modules and stuff like that. So to create a new user role, we're going to switch over to the permissions tab over here. And as soon as that loads, we'll see that there's two options here. There's permissions, which is the permissions page is what we're currently looking at. I'm going to switch over to the roles page. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new role. I would like to call this editor. So I'm just going to go ahead and try to give your roles logical names. And I'll go ahead and click add role. And we'll see something interesting here. I've created an editor role, and this is something that kind of bugs me a little bit about how Drupal works by default, but maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe some Drupal developer can enlighten me on this. But so I've just created a new user role, and this new user role apparently has more permissions currently than the administrator role. Or it doesn't actually have more permissions, but it is at a higher level than the administrator role. And I know, just think backwards here. Administrator, as far as I'm concerned, should have the most role or the most permissions. And my editor is going to have fewer permissions than my administrator role. So what I've done there is I've just reorganized these. And Drupal, this is another example of Drupal doing a good job of communicating with you. Drupal puts this little alert tip here and says, hey, changes made in this table will not be saved until the form is submitted. So we will need to click save order in order for this to be saved. But I want you to pay attention here to what's going on. I have moved editor over to above administrator because logically I want the editor to have um, more permissions, let's say, and more capabilities than just a plain old authenticated user, but they're going to have fewer permissions than the administrator. So that's why this order is really, really important here. And I'm going to save this order now, and then we're going to see on the other page why this makes sense too. So we've saved this order, and that's great. If I switch over to the permissions page, now let's take a look at how this page has changed. Okay, so what's changed on this page? What do you notice that's changed on this page? Right, we have a new role here. The new role we just created. So you did that. You just created a new role on your Drupal website, and we'll see that here. A lot of these choices have been made for you already, simply because Drupal assumed that if an authenticated user can post comments, then by default the editor and the administrator have to be able to post comments as well. Those permissions are inherited, and this is why it's important to make sure you've got the right order for all of your different roles on that other roles page because of the way these permissions get inherited. You don't want to be in a situation where you've got your editor can do something and the administrator can't. okay, which might happen if you had things in the wrong order. I just think that maybe when you're on this page, I would sort of expect that the administrator role should always stay at the bottom, but for some reason it doesn't do that automatically. So you just have to make sure that administrator role always stays at the bottom, okay? Okay, so we've created an editor role, and currently what can this editor do? Well, not a heck of a lot. In fact, at this point, the editor can do the exact same thing that the authenticated user can do. So we see here they can use the filtered HTML text format, they can view comments, they can post comments, skip comment approval. What else can they do? They can view published content. Okay, what was the reason for creating this editor role? Well, the reason was we wanted them to be able to work on the articles, okay? So we would like them to be able to create new content. We'd like to give them permission to edit their own content. And because they're, by virtue of the fact that they're an editor, why not give them permission to edit any content, okay? And if we trust them enough to be an editor, maybe we'll give them permission to delete own content and delete any content as well too. Notice that we're only giving them permission to do this when it comes to the article content type. We don't have to give them permission to play around with the basic pages. So this is important, right? Maybe you've spent an awful lot of time. Maybe you've got a legal department that put together a privacy policy, and you've got your communications department that put together the contact page and all that stuff. You don't necessarily want any old editor just going in and messing that up. But the editor's job, their job is simply to go in and look at articles only. Maybe this is the way you're setting it up. You could give the editor permission to edit the basic pages if you want to, but I'm just, I'm making an assumption. My hypothesis here is that we're building some sort of a site where we're going to have editors, making decisions about articles only. Okay, so that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and save permissions here. And all right, changes have been saved. And not a whole heck of a lot looks different, does it? And if we actually switch back to the list over here, yeah, okay, everything here looks the same. And that makes sense, doesn't it? That because we don't have any people or any user roles that are actually editors yet. So in the next screencast, we're going to go ahead and create a new user, and we're going to go through the process of assigning roles and talk about how that works. But for now, let's leave it at that. I hope that that's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.